let's be honest, this was never just about a dress. This was about power, hypocrisy, and a church empire shaking because the internet finally stopped whispering and started screaming. Because the moment that flesh-toned gown hit social media, it wasn't fabric people were staring at. It was the image of holiness cracking right in front of their eyes. One viral photo, one gala appearance, and suddenly the first lady of a megachurch wasn't being praised. She was being picked apart. And the silence from the pulpit? Oh, that silence didn't last long. See, the internet doesn't miss anything. And when Pastor Jamal Bryant's wife stepped out dressed like the red carpet had swallowed the altar whole, folks didn't just clutch their pearls. They started connecting dots. Messy dots. Old dots. Dots that had been ignored for years because of titles, money, and the fear of questioning a man of God. And right on cue, that Cat Williams clip started circulating again. You know the one. The warning. The prophecy dressed up as comedy. Don't trust no man, not even the one behind the pulpit. And suddenly people weren't laughing anymore, they were nodding. Because when the jokes start sounding like receipts, that's when things get uncomfortable. Social media dragged this story like it owed them money. Comment sections turned into sermons, threads turned into investigations. And what started as side-eye over a dress turned into a full-blown interrogation of the entire megachurch machine. Folks weren't asking, is this appropriate? Anymore. They were asking, who have we been worshiping? And Jamal Bryant? Oh, controversy follows him like a shadow that refuses to be cast out. You can't talk about this moment without rewinding the tape. Because Jamal Bryant isn't some low-profile preacher who accidentally caught astray. This is a media-trained, celebrity-adjacent, camera-ready pastor who knows exactly how to command attention. Big stages, big donors, big presence, always somewhere important, always photographed, always positioned. He's the senior pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Stonecrest, Georgia, a church with history, influence, and more skeletons than most people are comfortable acknowledging. And before Jamal even stepped into that pulpit in 2018, the building itself was already carrying weight from scandals that never really left, they just got quieter. Because people remember, even when churches try to forget. Back in 2010, lawsuits hit New Birth like a thunderclap. Allegations involving young men, coercion, lavish gifts, trips, promises, and a silence that followed once settlements were made behind closed doors. No transparency, no accountability sermons, just quiet. The kind of quiet that teaches congregations to look away. So when Jamal Bryant arrived years later, people hoped for redemption, renewal, a clean slate, but instead, what they got was spectacle. Because Jamal doesn't just preach, he performs. He markets, he positions himself at the intersection of faith, politics, celebrity, and viral relevance. TikToks, podcasts, fundraisers, name-dropping, always moving, always selling a vision. And sometimes that vision starts sounding less like scripture and more like strategy, like when he casually floated the idea of creating a new gospel for adults. Or when he suggested growing marijuana on church land to attract younger members. That wasn't whispered, he said it out loud, on camera. And the backlash was instant. People weren't confused, they were offended. Because at some point, innovation starts looking like exploitation. And the comments said what people had been thinking, this doesn't sound like saving souls, this sounds like chasing revenue streams. And that's the problem. Because once people suspect the church is being run like a business, every flashy choice becomes suspect. Every luxury looks like excess. Every sermon about humility starts ringing hollow. Then there's his personal life, and baby, the internet never forgets that chapter. His marriage to Giselle Bryant didn't end quietly. It didn't end privately. It exploded in public, with cheating admitted out loud. No rumors needed, no speculation. He owned it. And while some people applauded the honesty, others noticed the pattern. Accountability framed as healing, pain reframed as growth, but the damage to others? Barely mentioned. And before the dust even settled, there was a new wife. A new first lady, a new image to present. So when Dr. Carrie Turner Bryant stepped out at that December 2025 gala in that gown, tight, flesh-toned, patterned in a way that drew attention exactly where churches usually preach restraint, the reaction wasn't accidental. It was accumulated frustration, finally boiling over. People weren't just shocked, they were offended on principle. Because church culture has rules, unspoken ones, especially for first ladies. And this violated all of them. Then came the Bebel rumors. And once that door opened, there was no closing it. Blogs dissected photos. Forums zoomed, compared, speculated. And the comments? Vicious. Calling the church fake. calling the image fraudulent, calling out the hypocrisy in HD. Some went even further, tying the spectacle back to the church's past, questioning how much had been ignored because of charisma and power. When people start saying now we see why things were allowed, that's when the ground really starts to shake. And instead of letting the noise die down, Jamal Bryant jumped straight into the fire. He defended the dress, loudly, proudly, said people were insecure, jealous, said he bought the dress, he picked it. And that moment, that was gasoline. Because pastors don't usually brag about flesh-toned gowns from the pulpit-adjacent space. And when he framed it as envy instead of discernment, people heard something else entirely. Ego. The comments turned brutal. People said he was idolizing the flesh, elevating appearance over humility, that he wasn't called to pastor, maybe to motivate, entertain, activate, but not shepherd souls. And once again, that Cat Williams clip resurfaced like a warning siren. Don't trust intermediaries. Don't worship men. Don't confuse charisma for calling. Because suddenly, this wasn't about a woman's body, or a dress, or even surgery rumors. It was about a system where pastors look more like celebrities, churches look more like brands, and congregations feel more like consumers. And the louder Jamal got, the more people listened for what he wasn't saying. Because defensiveness reveals fear, and fear usually means something deeper is being protected. And right there, right at that moment, the conversation shifted. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was a reckoning beginning. Because once the internet smells fear, it doesn't back up, it circles. And that's exactly what happened next. The louder Jamal Bryant tried to shut the conversation down, the more people started digging sideways instead of forward. Old clips resurfaced. Old sermons were rewatched with fresh ears. Old patterns suddenly looked painfully consistent. Folks weren't just watching what he said, they were watching how he reacted. Defensive, sharp, almost panicked. And here's the thing nobody wanted to say out loud at first. If this really was just a dress, it wouldn't have shaken him like that. But it did. Because the outrage wasn't about fabric. It was about the brand cracking, the illusion slipping, the realization that maybe, just maybe, the pulpit had turned into a stage, and the congregation into an audience that finally realized they'd been clapping instead of discerning. People started asking uncomfortable questions. Why does humility always get preached from platforms built on excess? Why does sacrifice get demanded from pews while luxury lives on the altar? Why do so many of these megapastors explode when questioned instead of calmly shepherding through controversy? That's when the skit started going viral. Not sermons, not debates, comedy. Because satire has a way of telling the truth without asking permission. Flashy pastors in designer suits, private jets justified as blessings, offerings framed as loyalty tests. And the reason it hit so hard? Because nobody could honestly say it was inaccurate. That mirror was unforgiving. And suddenly, Jamal Bryant wasn't standing alone in the spotlight, he was standing as a symbol. Not of one scandal, but of an entire culture people had been uneasy about for years. A culture where the line between faith and fame got blurry. Where pastors became influencers, where the church Instagram mattered more than the church floor. And once people start seeing patterns, they don't unsee them. They noticed how quickly money talk showed up, how often image was defended instead of reflection encouraged, how criticism was dismissed as jealousy instead of considered as conviction. And that's when the whisper turned into a roar. Something here is off. Because real spiritual leaders don't crumble under scrutiny, they steady themselves in it. But Jamal's response didn't feel steady. It felt personal, territorial, almost like someone guarding an empire instead of tending a flock. And the more he spoke, the clearer it became that this wasn't just offense, it was exposure anxiety. That disturbed spirit people mentioned? Yeah, folks felt that, because there's a difference between righteous anger and threatened control. And the internet has learned to tell them apart. People started revisiting his words differently now. The activism, the political positioning, the constant presence at elite tables. The way sermons sometimes sounded more like motivational speeches than scripture. None of that was new, but now it was being weighed, not celebrated. And then came the quiet part spoken loudly. When churches start looking like corporations, scandals get handled like PR crises instead of spiritual failures. Deflect, deny, reframe, attack the critics. Classic playbook. And here's what really rattled people. Jamal didn't just defend his wife. He centered himself. He made it about his choice, his taste, his authority. And in doing that, he accidentally confirmed the very thing critics were accusing him of: ego over humility. Because when a pastor's first instinct is to flex instead of reflect, people start questioning who the sermon is really for. And that's why this story didn't die after a week. That's why people are still talking, because the dress was just the match. The fuel had been building for years. Mega church culture is cracking. People are tired of feeling spiritually gaslit, tired of being told discernment equals jealousy, tired of watching pastors live like celebrities while members are told to have faith through financial struggle. And social media? Social media finally gave people permission to say it out loud without being silenced by church politics. This situation gave language to something people have felt in their gut for a long time. That maybe some churches stopped being sanctuaries and started being stages. That maybe some pastors fell in love with applause more than accountability. That maybe faith got mixed with fame and nobody checked the expiration date. And the most dangerous part? When spiritual leaders start believing their own branding. Because at that point, correction feels like attack, questions feel like betrayal, and any challenge becomes the devil instead of discernment. That's why Cat Williams' words landed differently this time. It wasn't comedy anymore, it was caution. A reminder that faith doesn't need intermediaries in designer suits. That God doesn't require luxury branding. That charisma is not calling. And the internet heard it. That's why people aren't backing down. That's why they're not apologizing. Because this moment feels bigger than gossip. It feels like a spiritual audit. Not of one man, not of one woman, but of an entire system that's been operating unchecked for too long. And Jamal Bryant, whether he likes it or not, he's now the face of that conversation. Because when you occupy a pulpit that large, every move is magnified, every choice becomes symbolic, and every reaction tells a story, sometimes louder than the sermon itself. So no, this was never just about a dress. It was about power, money, image, and the uncomfortable truth that some churches may have drifted far from the humility they preach. And now that people are looking closer, there's no going back to blind reverence. Because once faith meets discernment, the performance is over. Performance is over. Performance is over. Performance is